The December wind carried a bite that seemed to pierce through even the thickest winter coats as Catherine stepped out of her car at the small antique shop on the outskirts of Windsor. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. The shop, Memories and Treasures, had been recommended by her dear friend Sarah, who insisted that the elderly proprietor, Mrs. Henderson, possessed an almost magical ability to find exactly what people needed, even when they didn't know what they were looking for themselves. Catherine had been struggling for weeks to find the perfect Christmas gift for William. After 15 years of marriage, she had given him countless ties, watches, books, and gadgets. Each year, the challenge seemed to grow more difficult. How do you surprise someone who seemingly has everything? How do you show love to a person who has devoted his entire life to duty and service? The bell above the door chimed softly as Catherine entered the warm, dimly lit shop. The scent of old wood and lavender immediately enveloped her, creating an atmosphere that felt both mysterious and comforting. Every surface was covered with carefully arranged antiques, delicate china teacups, vintage jewelry boxes, old photographs in ornate frames, and books with worn leather bindings that spoke of countless readers across the decades. Mrs. Henderson emerged from behind a towering display case, her silver hair perfectly arranged despite her advanced age. She wore a deep purple cardigan over a floral dress, and her eyes held the kind of warmth that immediately put visitors at ease. There was something almost ethereal about her presence, as if she existed in a different time where courtesy and genuine care for others still mattered above all else. "You must be Catherine," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. "Sarah called ahead and mentioned you might be stopping by. She said you're looking for something very special for your husband." Catherine nodded, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of beautiful objects surrounding her. "Yes, I am. But, honestly, I'm not even sure what I'm looking for. William is, well, he's quite particular about things. He appreciates quality and history, but he's not one for frivolous purchases." Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Ah, a man of substance. Those are often the most challenging to shop for, but also the most rewarding when you find exactly the right thing." She gestured for Catherine to follow her deeper into the shop. "Tell me about him. What brings him joy? What are his passions beyond his public duties?" As they walked between towering shelves filled with treasures from bygone eras, Catherine found herself opening up in a way she hadn't expected. "He loves history, particularly military history. He has a deep respect for those who served before us. He's also passionate about conservation and environmental protection. But, more than anything, he values family and tradition. He's always been fascinated by stories of how ordinary objects can carry extraordinary meaning across generations." Mrs. Henderson stopped abruptly in front of a glass cabinet that Catherine hadn't noticed before. Inside, nestled on a bed of deep blue velvet, lay a collection of what appeared to be military medals and decorations. But these weren't ordinary medals. Each one seemed to glow with its own inner light, as if the medal itself held memories of the brave souls who had once worn them. "These," Mrs. Henderson said softly, her voice taking on an almost reverent tone, "are very special indeed. Each medal here has a story, a life attached to it. They're not just pieces of metal and ribbon, they're tangible connections to moments of extraordinary courage and sacrifice." Catherine leaned closer, her eyes drawn to one particular medal that seemed to stand apart from the others. It was a Distinguished Service Cross, its bronze surface bearing the patina of age but still maintaining its dignified appearance. The red, white, and blue ribbon was faded but intact, speaking to careful preservation over many decades. "That one," Mrs. Henderson noted, following Catherine's gaze, belonged to Squadron Leader James Morrison. He served in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. Shot down over occupied France in 1943, he spent 18 months working with the French resistance before finally making his way back to England. He received this medal for his extraordinary valor, not just in combat, but in helping to save the lives of dozens of Allied airmen who had been shot down behind enemy lines. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the December weather outside. "What happened to him after the war?" "He lived a quiet life," Mrs. Henderson replied. "Married his sweetheart, raised 3 children, worked as a teacher. He never spoke much about his wartime experiences, as was common with many veterans of that generation. But his grandson brought this medal to me last month. Squadron Leader Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 97, and his family felt that the medal should go to someone who would truly understand its significance. Catherine's heart began to race as she imagined William's reaction to such a gift. She knew how deeply he respected military service and sacrifice. She had seen him move to tears during veterans' ceremonies, watched him spend hours listening to the stories of elderly servicemen and women who had lived through conflicts that had shaped the modern world. "There's something else, Mrs. Henderson continued, opening the cabinet with a small brass key she pulled from her pocket. She lifted the metal case gently, revealing a handwritten letter tucked beneath it. Squadron Leader Morrison left this. He wanted whoever received his medal to understand the full story. With trembling fingers, Catherine accepted the letter. The paper was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear and strong. As she began to read, she felt as though she was being transported back in time. "To whoever may receive this medal, I hope it finds its way to someone who understands that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. During my time in France, I met farmers who risked everything to hide Allied airmen, children who carried messages through German checkpoints, elderly women who shared their meager rations with strangers. They taught me that heroism isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about making the choice, again and again, to do what's right, even when no one is watching, even when the cost is dear." Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she continued reading. The letter went on to describe specific acts of kindness and courage that Squadron Leader Morrison had witnessed, painting a picture of ordinary people rising to extraordinary circumstances. It was exactly the kind of story that would resonate deeply with William's sense of duty and service. "How much?" Catherine asked quietly, already knowing that she would find a way to afford whatever price Mrs. Henderson named. "For you, dear, £500, Mrs. Henderson replied. "I know it's significant, but I also know this medal is meant to be with your William. Some things are simply destined to find their proper home." Catherine didn't hesitate. She reached for her purse, her hands shaking slightly with excitement and anticipation. As Mrs. Henderson carefully wrapped the medal and letter in tissue paper and placed them in an elegant wooden box, Catherine could hardly contain her joy. This wasn't just a gift, it was a piece of living history, a tangible connection to values and principles that both she and William held dear. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Henderson said as she handed Catherine the box. Squadron Leader Morrison believed that objects like this carry a kind of energy, a responsibility. He would want William to know that this medal isn't just about honoring the past, but about inspiring future service and sacrifice. As Catherine left the shop, the winter wind no longer seemed quite so harsh. She clutched the box containing the medal against her chest, her mind already racing with plans for Christmas morning. She could picture William's face when he opened the box, could imagine the quiet moment of recognition when he read Squadron Leader Morrison's letter. For the first time in weeks, Catherine felt the true spirit of Christmas filling her heart. She had found something that would not only surprise and delight her husband but would also honor the memory of a hero whose story deserved to be remembered. The Kate effect, as the media sometimes called her ability to choose meaningful and impactful gifts, was indeed in full force. The drive back to their home was filled with a sense of anticipation and joy that Catherine hadn't experienced in years. She carefully hid the medal in her jewelry box, wrapped in the tissue paper that still carried the faint scent of lavender from Mrs. Henderson's shop. Every time she passed their bedroom over the following days, she felt a little thrill knowing that such a perfect gift was waiting for Christmas morning. But Catherine had no idea that in just a few short days, her perfect gift would disappear under circumstances that would challenge everything she thought she knew about trust, loyalty, and the true meaning of Christmas. The morning of December 23rd dawned crisp and clear, with a light dusting of snow covering the grounds around their home. Catherine woke with the excitement of a child on Christmas Eve, her mind immediately turning to the precious medal hidden in her jewelry box. She had managed to keep the secret for 3 days, which felt like a remarkable achievement given how eager she was to share the beautiful story of Squadron Leader Morrison with William. Catherine had planned everything meticulously. She would wrap the medal after William left for his final official engagement before the Christmas break. She had already purchased the perfect wrapping paper, a deep navy blue with silver stars that seemed fitting for such a meaningful military decoration. The wooden box would be placed in a slightly larger gift box, surrounded by tissue paper, creating layers of anticipation that would make the eventual reveal even more special. William left early that morning for a visit to a local veterans hospital, where he would spend time with former servicemen and women who couldn't be with their families for Christmas. It was exactly the kind of duty that reminded Catherine why she had fallen in love with him, his genuine compassion for others, particularly those who had sacrificed so much for their country. As she kissed him goodbye at the door, Catherine felt an extra warmth knowing that in just 2 days, she would be giving him something that would honor that very compassion. After William's departure, Catherine decided to start her day with a visit to the jewelry box to simply look at the medal one more time. She climbed the stairs to their bedroom, her heart light with anticipation. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, creating dancing patterns on the carpet that seemed to match her joyful mood. But, when Catherine opened her jewelry box, the carefully wrapped package was gone. For a moment, she simply stared at the empty space where the medal should have been, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. She carefully moved aside her other jewelry, thinking perhaps the package had somehow shifted to the back of the box. But there was nothing there except the familiar pieces she wore regularly. Catherine felt her chest tighten with panic. She began searching frantically through every drawer in her dresser, then moved on to William's wardrobe, checking pockets and searching through his personal belongings. Perhaps she had absent-mindedly moved the medal for safekeeping and forgotten. But, as the minutes ticked by with no sign of the precious gift, Catherine's panic began to transform into something else entirely, a cold, sinking realization that someone had taken it. The only people who had access to their bedroom were the household staff, and Catherine had always trusted them implicitly. Maria, their housekeeper, had been with them for over 8 years. She was a devoted grandmother who often shared stories about her own family's struggles and triumphs. Thomas, their part-time groundskeeper and handyman, had been recommended by close friends and had always been completely reliable. Catherine's mind raced through the possibilities. Had one of the staff members seen her hiding the medal and been tempted by its obvious value? The thought made her feel sick to her stomach. She had always prided herself on creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and trust in their home. The staff were treated well, paid fairly, and considered almost part of the family. With shaking hands, Catherine called Maria, trying to keep her voice calm and casual. "Maria, I seem to have misplaced something from my jewelry box. Have you noticed anything unusual when cleaning the bedroom this week?" Maria's voice came through the phone filled with immediate concern. "Oh, Mrs. Catherine, no, nothing unusual. I always dust around your jewelry box very carefully, just as you taught me. Is something missing? Should I come in today to help you look?" The genuine worry in Maria's voice made Catherine feel even worse. Either Maria was an exceptional actress, or she truly had no knowledge of the missing medal. "No, that's not necessary, Maria. I'm sure I'll find it. Enjoy your day off with your grandchildren." After hanging up, Catherine sat on the edge of her bed, feeling more confused and upset than she had in years. The financial loss of the medal was significant, but that wasn't what truly mattered. What broke her heart was the thought that someone she trusted had betrayed that trust. Even worse was the realization that she would now have to face Christmas morning without the perfect gift she had been so excited to give William. Catherine spent the rest of the morning searching every inch of the house. She looked in places where the medal couldn't possibly be, driven by a desperate hope that she had somehow misremembered where she had hidden it. She checked coat pockets, bookshelves, even the kitchen cabinets, all while fighting back tears of frustration and disappointment. When William returned home that afternoon, Catherine was sitting in their living room, staring out the window at the snow-covered garden. Her usual bright demeanor was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a sadness that immediately caught his attention. "Darling, what's wrong?" William asked, settling beside her on the sofa and taking her hand. "You look as though you've lost your best friend." Catherine's first instinct was to tell him everything about the beautiful medal, about Squadron Leader Morrison's story, about the devastating discovery that it had been stolen. But something held her back. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps it was a desire to protect him from the disappointment she was feeling. Instead, she managed a weak smile. "I'm just feeling a bit melancholy about Christmas, I suppose. Sometimes the pressure to make everything perfect can be overwhelming." William studied her face with the careful attention he had learned during years of reading people in official settings. He knew Catherine well enough to recognize that there was more to her distress than general holiday stress, but he also respected her enough not to push when she clearly wasn't ready to share. "Perhaps we should go for a walk," he suggested. "The fresh air might help clear your mind." They bundled up in warm coats and scarves and ventured out into the crisp December air. The grounds around their home were transformed by the light snow, creating a winter wonderland that should have lifted Catherine's spirits. Instead, every step reminded her of the joy she had felt just that morning, planning the perfect Christmas surprise that was now impossible. As they walked, William shared stories from his visit to the Veterans Hospital. He spoke of a 93-year-old former RAF pilot who had regaled him with tales of flying missions over Europe during the war. The man had shown William a few of his old medals, explaining the history behind each one with the kind of detailed memory that only comes from experiences that have been carried in one's heart for decades. "There's something profoundly moving about these tangible connections to history," William said as they paused near an old oak tree whose branches were dusted with snow. "These men carry their stories not just in their memories, but in the physical objects that witnessed their courage. A medal or a photograph or a letter from home, these things become sacred relics of human experience." Catherine felt her throat constrict with emotion. William's words perfectly captured why the squadron leader Morrison's medal would have been such a meaningful gift. It wasn't just about the monetary value or even the historical significance. It was about the human connection, the bridge between past and present that such objects created. "William," Catherine began hesitantly, then stopped. She wanted desperately to tell him about the medal, about how perfect it would have been, about the devastating loss she was feeling. But the words wouldn't come. "Yes, darling?" Catherine shook her head, managing another forced smile. "Nothing important. Just that I love hearing your thoughts on these things. Your respect for history and service is one of the things I admire most about you." That evening, as they prepared for bed, Catherine found herself staring at the empty jewelry box once again. The space where the medal had been seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of her failure to keep safe the one gift that could have made this Christmas truly special. She lay awake long into the night, her mind churning through possibilities and scenarios. Should she report the theft to the police? Should she confront the staff directly? Should she return to Mrs. Henderson's shop to see if there might be another suitable gift available? But, deep in her heart, Catherine knew that nothing could replace Squadron Leader Morrison's medal. It wasn't just about finding another antique or another military decoration. It was about the specific story, the particular connection to courage and sacrifice that had made the medal perfect for William. That story was now lost, along with the medal itself. As Christmas Eve dawned, Catherine faced the reality that she had nothing meaningful to give the man she loved more than anything in the world. The Kate effect that had served her so well in choosing thoughtful, impactful gifts seemed to have deserted her at the moment when she needed it most. Little did Catherine know that the disappearance of the medal would soon reveal truths about love, sacrifice, and the real meaning of Christmas that would forever change how she understood the true nature of giving. Christmas Eve arrived with all the traditional fanfare that Catherine usually loved, the warm glow of candlelight throughout their home, the gentle sounds of Christmas carols playing softly in the background, and the anticipation that hung in the air like the scent of cinnamon and pine. But, this year, Catherine moved through the familiar rituals with a heavy heart, her mind constantly returning to the empty space in her jewelry box where Squadron Leader Morrison's medal should have been. She had spent a sleepless night wrestling with whether to tell William about the theft. Part of her wanted to share the burden of her disappointment, to let him comfort her as he had done so many times before. But, another part of her, perhaps the prouder part, couldn't bear the thought of admitting that she had failed to protect something so precious. How could she explain that the perfect gift, the one that would have honored everything he stood for, had simply vanished under her watch? William seemed to sense her distraction as they went through their Christmas Eve traditions. They attended the evening service at their local church, where the familiar readings and carols usually filled Catherine with peace and joy. This year, however, she found herself fighting back tears during the reading from Luke about there being no room at the inn. The theme of disappointment and lost hopes hit far too close to home. After the service, they returned home to find a small package waiting on their doorstep. It was wrapped in plain brown paper with no identifying markings, just William's name written in careful block letters. Catherine felt her pulse quicken as she watched William examine the mysterious package. "That's odd," William said, turning the package over in his hands. "I wasn't expecting anything. Were you?" Catherine shook her head, though a wild hope was beginning to form in her chest. Could someone have found the missing medal? Could this anonymous package somehow contain the answer to her prayers? William carried the package inside and set it on the table in their sitting room, but made no move to open it immediately. "Should we save it for Christmas morning?" he asked, though Catherine could see the curiosity in his eyes. "Perhaps we should open it now," Catherine suggested, her voice sounding strangely strained to her own ears. "It might be something that requires our attention tonight." With careful fingers, William unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a simple white box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small wooden frame containing a photograph. But this wasn't just any photograph, it was a black and white image of a young RAF pilot standing beside his aircraft, his face serious but his eyes bright with determination. Attached to the frame was a small piece of paper with a message written in the same block letters that had adorned the outside of the package: Squadron Leader James Morrison, 1923 to 2019. His medal has found its way to someone who will honor his memory. This photograph belongs with those who understand the true cost of courage. Catherine gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. William looked at her with growing concern and confusion. "Catherine, what is it? You look as though you've seen a ghost. Do you know something about this photograph?" The weight of the past few days, the excitement of finding the perfect gift, the devastating disappointment of its disappearance, and now this mysterious appearance of Squadron Leader Morrison's photograph suddenly became too much for Catherine to bear. The story came pouring out of her in a rush of words punctuated by tears. She told William about her visit to Mrs. Henderson's shop, about the medal that had seemed perfect for him, about the letter from Squadron Leader Morrison that had moved her so deeply. She described the careful way she had hidden the medal in her jewelry box, and the shocking moment when she had discovered it was gone. Through it all, William listened with growing amazement and concern. "Darling, why didn't you tell me any of this before?" he asked gently, pulling her into his arms as she finished her account. "I was so embarrassed," Catherine sobbed into his shoulder. "I had found the perfect gift for you, something that would have honored everything you believe in, and I lost it. I failed to protect something precious, and now it's gone forever." William held her close, stroking her hair as he processed everything she had told him. "Catherine, you didn't fail at anything. If someone stole the medal, that speaks to their character, not yours. And the care you put into choosing such a meaningful gift that means more to me than any physical object ever could." "But you would have loved it," Catherine said through her tears. Squadron Leader Morrison's letter was so beautiful, talking about how courage means doing what's right even when no one is watching. It was exactly the kind of story that speaks to your heart. William was quiet for a long moment, his mind working through the mysterious appearance of Squadron Leader Morrison's photograph. Something about the timing, about the fact that whoever had left it knew about the medal's connection to Squadron Leader Morrison, didn't quite add up. "Catherine," he said slowly, "I think there's more to this story than we realize. Someone wanted us to have this photograph tonight, someone who knows about the medal and understands its significance. The question is, who?" As if summoned by his words, they heard the sound of footsteps on the gravel path outside their home. William moved to the window and peered out into the snowy evening. A figure was approaching their front door, someone they both recognized immediately. "It's Thomas," William said, his voice filled with surprise. Catherine's heart sank. Thomas, their trusted groundskeeper, was the person she had least wanted to suspect. He had always seemed so honest, so dedicated to his work. The thought that he might have stolen the medal made her feel sick with betrayal. William opened the door before Thomas had a chance to knock. The older man stood on their doorstep, his weathered hands clutching something wrapped in a familiar piece of tissue paper. His face was etched with an expression Catherine had never seen before, a mixture of dignity, sorrow, and something that looked almost like relief. Mr. William, Mrs. Catherine, Thomas began, his usually steady voice trembling slightly. I need to return something to you, and I need to explain why I took it. Catherine felt the world spinning around her as Thomas unwrapped the tissue paper to reveal Squadron Leader Morrison's medal, exactly as she remembered it, complete with its faded ribbon and the small wooden box containing his letter. You? Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. But, Thomas, why? Thomas stepped inside when William gestured for him to enter. He looked older than Catherine had ever seen him, as though the weight of carrying this secret had aged him considerably in just a few days. Mrs. Catherine, when I was cleaning the windows in your bedroom 3 days ago, I saw you hiding this medal. I recognized it immediately. Thomas's voice grew stronger as he continued his explanation. You see, Squadron Leader James Morrison was my grandfather. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She stared at Thomas, seeing him truly for the first time. Now that he had spoken the connection aloud, she could see the resemblance in the determined set of his jaw, the same bright intelligence in his eyes that had shone from the young pilot in the photograph. Your grandfather? William asked, his voice filled with amazement. Thomas nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. When he died last year, my mother inherited his medals and papers. She needed money for medical bills, so she sold most of his things to that antique shop. I tried to buy back the medal, but Mrs. Henderson had already sold it by the time I could scrape together enough money. Catherine felt her heart breaking all over again, but for entirely different reasons than before. Oh, Thomas, I had no idea. If I had known it belonged to your family. That's just it, Mrs. Catherine, Thomas interrupted gently. When I saw you with grandfather's medal, my first thought was to take it back. It belongs to our family, after all. But, then, I remembered something grandfather always told us. Thomas paused, reaching into his pocket to pull out a worn piece of paper, another letter, written in the same strong handwriting Catherine had read in Mrs. Henderson's shop. This is a letter grandfather wrote to our family before he died. In it, he said that his medals and decorations shouldn't be kept in a drawer or a display case. He wanted them to go to people who would understand their true meaning, people who would be inspired by the stories they represent to continue serving others. William and Catherine exchanged glances, both beginning to understand the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding before them. Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. When I took the medal, I thought I was protecting my family's heritage. But, as I held it, as I read his letter again, I realized that grandfather would want it to be with you, Mr. William. You embody everything he believed in about service and duty and putting others before yourself. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face again, but these were tears of wonder rather than sadness. So you brought the photograph as well? I wanted you to see his face, to understand that he was a real person with hopes and dreams, not just a name on a medal, Thomas explained. And I wanted to return the medal on Christmas Eve because grandfather always said Christmas was about giving away the things we treasure most to the people who need them most. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Squadron Leader Morrison's wisdom settling around them like a blessing. Catherine realized that the medal's brief disappearance hadn't been a theft at all, it had been part of a larger story about family, sacrifice, and the true meaning of Christmas that was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. Christmas morning dawned with a magical quality that seemed to transform even the most familiar corners of their home into something special. The snow from the previous days had continued to fall gently throughout the night, creating a pristine white landscape that sparkled in the early sunlight. But, for Catherine, the true magic of the morning lay not in the beautiful scenery outside, but in the extraordinary gift that now sat wrapped beneath their Christmas tree. After Thomas's revelation the previous evening, the three of them had spent hours talking about Squadron Leader Morrison's life and legacy. Thomas had brought with him a small collection of his grandfather's photographs and letters, sharing stories that brought the war hero to life in ways that no history book ever could. They learned about Morrison's love for classical music, his gentle way with animals, and his unwavering belief that every person deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their station in life. Most remarkably, they discovered that Squadron Leader Morrison had specifically requested in his final letter to the family that his medals should eventually find their way to someone in public service who would be inspired by his story to continue serving others. Thomas had initially planned to honor this wish by donating the medals to a military museum, but when he saw Catherine with the Distinguished Service Cross, he realized that fate had intervened in a way his grandfather would have appreciated. William had insisted that Thomas join them for Christmas dinner, and, throughout the evening, Catherine had watched the two men discover a connection that went far beyond their employer-employee relationship. They shared stories of military history, discussed the challenges facing modern veterans, and found in each other a mutual respect that would clearly extend well beyond the holiday season. Now, as Catherine descended the stairs on Christmas morning, she carried with her not just the beautifully wrapped medal in its wooden box, but also the photograph of Squadron Leader Morrison and a special edition that she had spent the early morning hours preparing, a handwritten letter of her own, addressed to Thomas and his family, explaining how much his grandfather's story meant to both her and William. William was already in the sitting room, adding fresh logs to the fire that cast dancing shadows across the walls. He looked up as Catherine entered, and she could see in his eyes the same sense of anticipation and wonder that she felt in her own heart. "Good morning, my love," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "Did you sleep well?" Catherine smiled, remembering how peacefully she had slept for the first time in days. "Better than I have in weeks. There's something about understanding the full story that brings such peace, don't you think?" They settled together on the sofa, surrounded by the warm glow of the fire and the soft light filtering through the frost-covered windows. Catherine had placed Squadron Leader Morrison's medal beneath the tree in a position of honor, and she could hardly contain her excitement as she watched William's eyes fall upon the carefully wrapped package. "Shall we begin with that one?" Catherine suggested, trying to keep her voice casual despite the emotions swelling in her chest. William reached for the package with the same careful attention he brought to all important moments. As he began to unwrap the navy blue paper with its silver stars, Catherine found herself holding her breath. Even though she knew he would love the gift, even though the events of the previous evening had confirmed that this medal was meant to be with him, she still felt the nervous anticipation of wanting to give someone she loved something truly meaningful. When William opened the wooden box and saw Squadron Leader Morrison's Distinguished Service Cross nestled in its bed of velvet, his reaction was everything Catherine had hoped for and more. His eyes widened with recognition and wonder, and she could see him immediately understanding the significance of what he held in his hands. "Catherine," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the medal you were telling me about last night." "But, how?" "Thomas wanted you to have it," Catherine said softly. "Just as his grandfather would have wanted. It belongs with someone who understands what it represents." William lifted the medal carefully from its case, examining the intricate details of its design and the weight of its history. When he found Squadron Leader Morrison's original letter tucked beneath the medal, Catherine watched as his eyes moved across the handwritten words, absorbing the wisdom and courage that had been preserved on those yellowed pages. True courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it, William read aloud, his voice reverent. "They taught me that heroism isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about making the choice, again and again, to do what's right, even when no one is watching, even when the cost is dear." As he finished reading, William set the letter aside and looked at Catherine with an expression of profound gratitude and love. "This is extraordinary, darling. Not just the medal itself, but the entire story. The way it came to us, the connection to Thomas and his family, the reminder of what service really means. It's the most meaningful gift I've ever received." Catherine felt tears of joy flowing down her cheeks as she reached for the second part of her gift, the framed photograph of young Squadron Leader Morrison standing beside his aircraft. "Thomas wanted you to have this as well, so you could see the man behind the medal." William studied the photograph with the same careful attention he had given to the medal, and Catherine could see him connecting the young pilot's face with the stories they had heard the night before. "There's something timeless about his expression, isn't there? That combination of determination and humanity that you see in people who truly understand what they're fighting for." As they sat together admiring these tangible connections to history, Catherine pulled out the letter she had written that morning. "I have something else for you, but this isn't from the past, it's for the future." William looked puzzled as she handed him the sealed envelope with his name written on it in her careful script. Inside, he found a letter that Catherine had poured her heart into during the quiet hours of Christmas morning. My dearest William, Squadron Leader Morrison's medal has taught me something profound about the nature of giving and receiving. The most precious gifts aren't those we acquire or even those we keep, but those we pass along to others who need them most. This Christmas, I want to make a promise to you and to the memory of Squadron Leader Morrison. We will establish a foundation in his name to support veterans and their families, particularly those facing financial hardships. Thomas's mother should never have had to choose between keeping her father's medals and paying for medical care. We can honor Squadron Leader Morrison's legacy not just by treasuring his medal, but by carrying forward his belief that everyone deserves dignity and support. William's eyes filled with tears as he read Catherine's proposal. A foundation in his name. Catherine, that's brilliant. It's exactly what he would have wanted, his story inspiring ongoing service to others. Thomas has already agreed to serve on the board, Catherine continued, her excitement growing as she saw William's enthusiastic response. He has connections throughout the veteran community, and his grandfather's story will be the foundation's guiding inspiration. As if summoned by their conversation, they heard the sound of footsteps on the front path. Thomas appeared at their door carrying a thermos of tea and a basket of freshly baked scones that his wife had prepared as a Christmas offering. His weathered face was bright with joy, and Catherine realized that yesterday's revelations had lifted a weight from his shoulders that he had been carrying for months. "Merry Christmas, Thomas," Catherine called out as she opened the door. "Please come in and join us. We have something wonderful to discuss with you." As Thomas settled into a chair by the fire, William shared Catherine's proposal for the Squadron Leader Morrison Foundation. Catherine watched as Thomas's eyes lit up with the same enthusiasm they had seen in the photograph of his grandfather, that combination of determination and hope that seemed to run in the Morrison family bloodline. "Grandfather would be so proud," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "He always said that the best way to honor the past was to build a better future for the next generation." They spent the morning developing plans for the foundation, sharing stories, and marveling at the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them all together. Catherine realized that what had begun as her search for the perfect Christmas gift had evolved into something far more meaningful, a lasting legacy that would honor Squadron Leader Morrison's memory while helping countless veterans and families in need. As the day progressed and they prepared for their Christmas dinner, Catherine reflected on the true meaning of what people called the Kate effect. She had always thought it referred to her ability to choose thoughtful, impactful gifts. But now she understood that the real Kate effect wasn't about the objects themselves, it was about the connections they created, the stories they preserved, and the inspiration they provided for future service and sacrifice. Squadron Leader Morrison's medal had indeed vanished within minutes of being placed beneath their Christmas tree, but not because it had been taken away. Rather, it had disappeared into a larger story of family, love, and service that would continue for generations to come. The medal would remain in William's care, not as a possession to be treasured in isolation, but as a sacred trust to be honored through ongoing action. As Catherine looked around their dining room that evening, at William wearing the medal proudly on his Christmas jacket, at Thomas sharing stories of his grandfather's wisdom, at the plans for the foundation spreading across their table, she realized that the Kate effect had indeed been in full force this Christmas. But its power lay not in the gift that had briefly disappeared, but in the love, sacrifice, and service that had brought them all together. The snow continued to fall gently outside their windows as they raised their glasses in a toast to Squadron Leader Morrison's memory and to the future they would build in his honor. And, in that moment, Catherine understood that the most precious gifts are never really lost, they simply transform into something even more beautiful than we could have imagined.